What's up, humans? This is Copeland with Rising Tide, and today I want to talk about one of my most beloved and most hated words, productivity. I want you to sit with that for a minute. What does that word say to you? What does productivity even mean? If you think about it, if you go back to the root of it, productivity is about producing more over a certain amount of time. Basic equation is productivity equals production rate over time. Well, production over time. It's a rate when it's over time anyway, but not to nerd out here. But so if you think about it, productivity really is a term that came about during the Industrial Revolution. As we were mechanizing things, as we were turning technology around to serve humankind, we were wondering, how do we measure if what we did actually mattered? And so productivity turned into a tool to determine if you were getting the most out of your investment. It's interesting that in our modern age, it's very clear if you look at the numbers that an average worker today is far more productive than an average worker 5, 20, 50, 100 years ago, solely because of technology. Not even talking about generative AI, not even talking about any of the other more modern automation tools that we're talking about. Just in general, the very fact that we can take our phone and look up something, or that we can use a computer to run numbers in a spreadsheet or anything like that, regardless of the extent of technology, it has still touched your business and the way that you work in some way that has increased your productivity or increased the average worker's productivity to have an end benefit to our overall economy, to our customers, to our industries. And so with that, I talk about productivity with this as a two-edged sword. As someone who has run multiple businesses and has worked for herself as a freelancer, knowing what my output is versus how much time I put in is really important. I need to make ends meet, so I know the final number that I need to make to bring home. And so if I want more life in my days versus days in my life, if I want to be able to do the things that I need to do, productivity is something that I needed to keep a close eye on. And then as I moved into more managerial roles and as I've run businesses, it's very important to understand your numbers, to understand what's going on. But I really want to consider that when we look at productivity as our output over time, it really feeds into one of those dark parts of us, right? It feeds into this idea that I am the sum of what I accomplish, that in order to be valuable, in order for people to see me, I need to be putting out more. I need to be putting in more lines of code. I need to be putting in more videos. I need to be putting out more content. You think about productivity, and really the core root of that word is product. And it really can put us in a dark place because we have to produce. We have to produce more. We have to be seen. We have to keep doing things to be known. And that little voice in the back of our head about the goals that we want to accomplish can be really dangerous, frankly, to actual meaningful move the needle work. And so what I really would like to talk about when we are talking about productivity is that we really should be turning that idea from it being a proxy for our value, our worth, and our satisfaction, and maybe instead of chasing that rabbit and eventually hitting a wall, that we can consider that it's not just about production, it's about the value that is created when we produce. And so if we can turn this conversation on its head, if we can say we're not looking at production for productivity, maybe instead we're looking for meaningful production in productivity, that may help us actually put more energy, put more vision back into our day-to-day lives and give us more value and more meaning as we are doing our 9 to 5 or however your workday looks. One of the problems with productivity, especially when you move into managerial type roles or if you're managing yourself, is that when you are just looking for production, it's not just about a personal value like, oh, am I only a number, but also the idea of productivity as just producing more makes you lose the point. If you are just trying to create more and more and more, and you don't have a clear vision about what the goal actually should be, if you are just creating more and more and more, and you don't actually know what the end goal is, and it's just this endless game of creating, that hamster wheel of unlimited horizon is not encouraging for anybody. It's often been said that necessity is the mother of invention, that having boundaries is actually what causes creativity, that it's not that endless openness is creative. It's that knowing that there's a finish line and knowing what the end goal is actually is what can motivate us to create meaningful and different solutions. And so when you're managing people, especially if you're managing like rock stars, it's one thing to manage like a new person and be training them and teaching them the ropes and all of that. Even if you're managing people that are doing kind of menial labor, even then it's kind of important to set little goals and to say, this is what meaningful work looks like. This is what good looks like. But beyond that, if you're working with rock stars, it is vital to be able to cast a vision and say, this is what our end product is. It's not just about creating more or doing more lines. It is about, or even releasing new features. You are looking at the product as a whole. You're looking at the vision as a whole. And if you can cast that vision, if you can see that with clarity, that in its end is going to boost, I hate to say it, productivity. But more than that, I want to reframe it as maybe efficiency. And still, I know, still a terrible mechanical word, but let's take a step back. So productivity, I gave you that equation. Output over time. Cool, productivity. Efficiency, on the other hand, maybe we can define that as meaningful output over time. So there's a little bit of a difference here. It's not just about this race, this rat race to the end. It's about thinking about what we're doing, making sure that it actually is the direction that we need to be going in, and not just creating for creating's sake, but creating with a vision and a goal and a heart behind it that actually contributes to our economy, our community, our industry, our society. It's all meaningful, but we just have to frame it the right way. If you look at these equations side by side, productivity, if you have 8 hours in a day, you want that productivity number high. You want to be able to have as much of your 8 hours filled with stuff. But if you look at efficiency, it's not about the 8 hours is what's important. It's about the meaningful work can override the 8 hours that you put in. So if you are moving the needle with 4 hours of work, your rate of addition, of benefit, not only to your company, but to yourself, going at home and knowing that you've done a good job and you've done what you need to do to not just further your company, but further yourself in this world, that is key to a lot of where we are going in our modern age. It can be very scary right now when you're talking about generative AI and everyone's like, oh, well, they're taking our jobs. And other people are like, no, well, you just need to know how to use the tools. Well, there is absolutely a middle ground. You need to know the tools, but also you need to know why you're doing things. So efficiency, in light of this, it honors the worker. It says, what do you have time or space for? Let's talk about your meaning and that you're not just a number or a product. It helps you understand your values as a company and execute those with intention. And then it also is sustainable. Instead of saying, I need to do more and more and more and more and more and more and more, which I'm very much so of the belief that we have finite resources and that it's very important to be intentional and even ruthless about how you spend your time. So if you consider that you can't just keep doing more and more and more and more, but maybe rather you have the same amount of input, but that it can have more impact as you are consistent, I think that that is the key of productivity or modern productivity. and in which case I'm calling efficiency in this conversation. Efficiency serves both workers and leaders better. For workers, when they are thinking about the idea of what they're doing and the reason why they're doing it instead of just pumping out numbers, it gives them autonomy and clarity. One of my favorite books that I've read is the Netflix No Rules Rules book, where it talks about, in one section specifically, giving people the vision and the parameters, essentially, for success, and then letting them make the decision. It's super important to be able to give your workers the agency to make the decisions that they need to make without having to hit some random number that you've just pulled out of the air based on maybe someone else's work 10 years ago. We want to be looking at things of value instead of just quantity. For leaders, it's super important because if you have happy workers that are looking at quality over quantity, you're able to address your company values, you're able to improve the quality of the product. If you have happy workers, you have better retention, so you don't have to train more people to do the same job. And then you've got this built-in resilience there, where you've got a product that people love to work on, a team that loves to be there. And oftentimes, what I've seen is when people understand the value of what they're doing, they're able to execute and deliver things, often on time, but with an energy and an ownership that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Efficiency asks better questions. It's not how fast did you do it or how much did you get done, but was it worth doing? So to talk about the difference between productivity and efficiency, I think it's really important to talk about my framework for what I think a good job looks like. This can be things that you hold yourself to. It doesn't have to be like, oh, my employer gives me the space to do this. While that's important, these are things that I essentially did for myself when I was working for places that had no resources. And so I want to be very clear that, again, productivity puts the onus on the product owner, it puts the onus on the company, whereas efficiency really can be an internal metric that you're able to track for yourself to know that you're doing a good job. So if you're looking at a good job or what you are doing with your occupation, your 9 to 5 every day, I like to call it triple D for diners, drive-ins, and dives. Okay, well, it's not diners, drive-ins, and dives. It is do, discover, and dream. A good job, if you are completing a good job yourself, you are going to be doing work, tasks that are given to you that you can complete. You're going to be discovering, which is not just learning or finding new things about your job, but interacting with other people. You're going to get feedback from customers. You're going to get feedback from colleagues. You're going to get feedback from your boss. You're able to take those things and roll them into how you do things as you are completing them. So it's a little, these things are based on each other. And then the third thing I like to say that often gets lost in the common worker is dream. Oftentimes we're given our marching orders and we're expected to just go and do it. But what could you actually be doing? How could you improve the systems that you're already working on? How could you improve your own systems? And so this little triple D of a workday, do, discover, dream, it's a feedback loop. As you do things, as you discover with other people, you can then take those things and dream up how you can improve stuff. But dreaming alone isn't the end all be all. You can't just think, oh, well, it would be nice to have these things. You have to go in and create meaningful change. You have to go and do the work that you've dreamt about. And so as we talk about efficiency, I really find that it's important to take that idea of productivity and say it's not just about what I do, it's about the meaningful connections that I make, and it's about the meaningful connections that I create outside of those things to bring it back together again in what I do. And so productivity is not useful in itself. What you do is not a benefit to necessarily your end goal, and it's really important to have clarity on that to be able to further accomplish your calling in life. So again, our triple D of a workday. Doing is executing with intention. Discovery is reflecting, learning, listening, exploring. And dreaming is resting, imagining, planning, and then realigning yourself so that you can take those things and start again the next day with what you're doing, discovering, and dreaming. So that's a nice framework. Cool. How do you actually physically accomplish that? And so the tools that I use that support efficiency, I again break into three things. Nothing as fun as triple D, but I like to look at it. How do I make myself more efficient? How do I give myself the time to produce high quality work with the right energy and alignment? So I want to propose to you that the tools that you should be using to become modernly productive are threefold. The first one is flow or rhythm. The second is hardware and software. And the third is space. I talk about space a lot, but no Neil deGrasse Tyson here. We'll come back to that. And I break this down into these three categories because I want to be clear that it doesn't cost money. It's not extra to be able to find value in your day or in what you're doing. It's not something that only people with corporate resources can provide. I come from an MSP background, scrappy background. I was also at a private university that didn't have a lot of money for training. I've been in a lot of places where a lot of the stuff that I had to do was outside of work, basically. And so it's really important to kind of break that down and consider the tools that are available are not just about something shiny and new. It may just be what you have available. So let's start with the first tool, flow or rhythm. One of the things that's been constant in my life, and I don't know if you can actually see it down there, but I have this Ink and Volt planner that I've used for, I think that's eight down there, maybe 7 or 8 years. I actually was gifted my first planner by my buddy Josh Mallard at Lime Cuda, website designers, really cool folks, him and Blake Imeson. But this planner is really lovely because it gives me not only weekly check-ins. So I've actually, this is open for today. I've got some of my notes from what I wanted to talk about here. And then I've got my to-do list essentially, and there's a place for like celebrations and things to remember. So this is really nice. I open this up every week and I put my schedule down there so I can actually see what I'm doing. So I do a little bit of pre-planning. And then every month though, it has this little check-in. It says, what are your goals for the month? And then what is a habit that you would like to create or track. And it also has this for the year as well. So you can actually go through and say, this is something that's important to me. I want to be able to do this. And it gives you, essentially, it gives me the flow or rhythm. There's a habit here that kind of changes with the seasons that I can say, okay, here's an important day. Let's sit down and let's actually think about what I need to be doing. So from a big picture, I'm able to say, I can visualize what my week looks like. I know what my flow needs to be through the week. Some days are not going to be the same. I may have an appointment. I may have back-to-back calls with customers. How do I support or move through that day? The other things that tie into flow or rhythm are less like that. I would say that's the most businessy of my flow or rhythm when it comes to efficiency. The other things that come to my efficiency are really basic human tasks that a lot of you are going to hate that I'm going to mention. Flow or rhythm is about how you move through the day or through time. So you may have a daily schedule that you need to be out of the house so you can be at work at a certain time, or that you have some certain standing meetings or even just client meetings that you have to keep in mind. You may also have deadlines or type of work that needs to get done. And so flow is how you are moving in between those things and how you are optimizing your human body to be able to continue doing them. And I think that's really important to talk about because that ties into sleep, that ties into fuel, that ties into structure and accountability. So when you're looking at your efficiency, it's highly possible that it's not just about you needing to go and make more happen. It may be that you need to take a step back and consider, what am I actually doing And do I have the space for it? And maybe it's time to say no to certain things. Maybe you need to actually have a bedtime. Maybe you need to meal prep on the weekends so that you actually have nutritious meals to have during the week that actually fuel you and your brain. Maybe you need to talk to a therapist because there's something going on in your life that is overwhelming you and taking over processing in your mind, and you're not actually able to work to your fullest. And so when we're talking about rhythm or flow, it's about figuring out what your day-to-day looks like and how you can cut out the distractions and better focus on making meaningful work happen. So that's the first tool, rhythm or flow. So flow ties into our triple D in all of the ways. You need to be able to have the space to operate well so that you can do things. You need to be in a good headspace so you can discover well, learn those things and retain them, and talk with other people. And you need to be able to have the space to dream. You need to be able to build your life in such a way that you have downtime to be able to solve interesting problems instead of just mindlessly completing tasks. The second set of tools are exactly what you thought of, software and hardware. So when you're like, oh, okay, cool, we're going to talk about productivity, we're going to talk about tools that are going to make me better. No, no, we're not. That's not how we're doing things. I mean, we are now, but I will start with, when you're looking at tools to increase your productivity or your efficiency, the first thing that you need to look at is the tools that you already have. The best tool for you is the tool that you already have. So if you are talking about wanting to use generative AI and you're in a Google shop, you likely have access to Gemini. Just use Gemini instead of getting a prescription. Just use Gemini instead of getting a subscription to ChatGPT. Take that tool, use it for all it's worth, get the most out of it. Don't worry about investing more in something that you don't have the funding for. The other part of using tools that you already have available to you is if you're working with an IT team, it's highly possible that they have tools already available for you that they support. And it's super important that you consider that there may be some safeguards in place to make sure that your company's IP isn't feeding other large language models or other databases, or client information isn't getting lost. So it's super important that you consider the tools that you already have available, because they may also have something that is comparable to the product that you want to use and you just didn't know, or maybe it's included in something that you're using that you are unfamiliar with, like Copilot being a part of Microsoft. That may not be something that you have access to, but you can talk to your team if you're on Microsoft and use Copilot. It can be pretty strong and pretty useful. It depends on how you set it up. So starting with software and hardware, consider the tools that you already have. When I was talking to one of my developers recently, she was copy and pasting something, and she went to copy it, and then she went to paste it, and a whole screen popped up, and it was like 20 different items that she had previously copied. So she had actually copied like 5 things and was able to just paste them really quickly from that menu. And I was like, oh my God, Jen, tell me how you did this. Very curious. And she was like, well, it's 2 things. The first thing is I downloaded a software product called Ditto. It's free. And then the second thing is she took her mouse that is programmable, so you can program macros to it. And whenever she clicks the middle button, it opens up Ditto. And so she's done this thing where it was basically no cost. She already had this mouse, and she even joked about it. It's a wired mouse that she's been using for years. And with one click and a free software product, she's able to copy and paste things very quickly instead of losing those copies. Because I do this all the time, where you go to copy something and you go to paste it, and then you accidentally hit copy, and then you have nothing in your cache. Yeah, I've done that a lot. So that was like really super cool to see that tool, and it was low cost. It was something that she already basically had available, and she was able to talk through it. So like use what you have first. Other tools that are super useful that I'd love to talk to you about, and won't spend too much time on because there's a ton of tools out there, but things that you may find useful, that I find useful, are time trackers. So I like to use something called Activity Watch. It's a free open source software because, again, I like to control my own data. But Activity Tracker, there's also Rescue Time, and if you're on a Mac, QObserve. So those are 3 time tracking products that just sit passively on your computer and watch what you do. So at the end of the day, they can actually give you a breakdown. You can categorize things that are productive, or value adding or distracting. And you can look at those numbers and say, okay, is this how I actually want to be spending my time? Did I spend my time doing things for clients, or did I spend my time making videos on productivity? You can do that now. And it's passive. It's not super invasive. And you just check it at the end of the day or at the end of the week, and you can get kind of like the rundown on what you've been doing. So really like time trackers. I really like personal knowledge management systems. So PKM is also something you may hear it by because we love acronyms. But I personally use Logseek. It is also free and open source, but you may want to use something like Obsidian or Notion, something that when you take notes, you're not just taking notes, you're able to categorize them, and then you can sort through them later. You can do to-do tasks, you essentially can journal, and you can tie all those things back together and be able to find information that maybe would otherwise get lost in notes that you weren't able to find. So that's super useful. Love personal knowledge management systems. And that helps with efficiency because not only are you able to see what you did, you can go back and find what you were discovering or doing in a certain day. And the end product for some PKMs, like Logseek, is you can actually have a graph of the things that you are looking at or that you've been working on, and it groups the topics together. So you can actually go through and see the themes and the certain products that you've been working on and dream up what you need to be doing next. So really love that concept. And that's a useful tool that you can roll into your day-to-day to consider your efficiency as you are doing discovering and dreaming. The third thing or tool that I want to talk about is space. And this is something that we don't talk about very much because we very much glamorize hustle culture. You meet up with a bunch of friends and you're like, hey guys, how's it going? And the first thing that you're probably going to hear is like, oh, busy. And we've glamorized this idea of busy, that we've just got to be constantly going or constantly doing. And there's not a lot of space for breathing room and insight. There's not a lot of space for thinking about what we're actually doing to help ourselves and others. And so I specifically left out in the software and hardware section, I specifically left out generative AI. I feel like we talk a lot about that, but I wanted to put it in this area because I think that we put generative AI in the doing category instead of in the discover and the dream category. So let me talk about this a little bit more. We know that generative AI is based on the information that's fed to it. We've seen studies where they can't identify people of African American descent as well as they can identify a person who's Caucasian. We've seen that already. We've seen that some of the outcomes are biased based on simply the information that was put in. We've seen that it hallucinates, that it can, regardless of the platform, that it will make up answers instead of giving like truth or reality. And so I'm talking about space because it is vital for our growth and our development to allow our brains to rest. I know, weird, right? It's vital. And if you're not paying for your team to have some downtime, to be able to think things through and to connect the dots, you're missing out on valuable aspects of efficiency. You're missing out on the way that the brain quietly closes the loop when it's not actively working through a task. And we can talk about the science behind that, but I'm talking about generative AI here because it should be used as a tool that gives you the space to dream and discover new things and to clarify what you need to be doing so that you can close that loop. I think it's really important that we are taking care of our mental health and that we're resting just for, the woo-woo aspects of like you're a human in a body and the world is hard. But beyond that, it makes you a better worker when you actually take the time to take a step back and evaluate the big picture. Like I was talking about with my journal. Do that. Not do it exactly like me, but like think about the big picture. A tool that you can use to create space for yourself is generative AI. It's ChatGPT, it's Gemini, it's Microsoft Copilot. These tools can give you the space to expand your horizon, to get clarity on what you're actually saying. If you're ADHD like me, you may get all of your thoughts jumbled in one place, and it may be helpful to say things out loud and then let a generative AI simplify it or clarify it. So you want to clarify those things so that as you're doing, discovering, and dreaming, you can be clear on closing that loop so that when you go back to do things again, you've got the space, you've got the direction, you've got the trajectory that you want to follow. So those are the 3 sets of tools that I hope that you'll use as you are looking to increase your efficiency and put more time back in your day. Rhythm. How are you spending your time? How are you holding yourself accountable to the promises that you've made yourself? Software and hardware. Often the best tool that you can have is the tool that you already have. Space. How are you taking these things and setting time apart so that you can actually process and get clarity on what you want to accomplish so that you can work with intention and with a trajectory that is unstoppable. In the end, productivity itself was a metric that was created for machines, and you are not a machine. So chasing productivity itself is not going to lead you to a more fulfilled or valuable life. I hope that this conversation has encouraged you to consider not how can I do more in my 8-hour day, which is a fine goal. Don't get me wrong. I do a lot in my day, but to do it with intention and in a way that puts essentially more time, more value, more vision in those 8 hours than pure product. And if we can do this, if we can consider taking our energy, that finite resource of our energy, of our mind, of our skill, if we can take that and pump it into not just producing more, but producing better, I hope, if nothing else, that this conversation has helped you kind of consider where you put your value, and not just in yourself, but also in your employees, and to take a step back and look at what your day-to-day looks like. Are you only mindlessly completing tasks that have been given to you? Or how are you taking the feedback that you've learned? How are you learning and applying that into what you are doing with intention? And then once you have those 2 things covered, which a lot of us do, how are you actually dreaming up what you can be doing next? How are you actually looking at those things and those systems that you're working on as you're doing and as you're discovering? And how are you improving them and taking the time and space to actually invest in yourself and in your team? And, with that, as you are looking at efficiency or meaningful productivity over pure production, I think that is where we can actually move the needle and find value in our companies and in what we do in our occupations. If we do that, we can actually feel fulfilled in the time that we have and spend more time doing the things that are actually fun to us, if you don't think that your job is already fun, which I do. So again, I'm Elle Copeland from Rising Tide. Thank you for joining me today as we talked about the difference between production and meaningful productivity. I hope that my framing of what the workday looks like as triple D, or doing, discovering, and dreaming, impacts you in a way that you're able to kind of think through how you actually want to use the productivity tools of rhythm and flow, software and hardware, and space to actually improve the way that you handle your job, your team, and your business. And in the end, I hope that you'll, like and subscribe, join the Rising Tide team as we talk about different concepts like this, about building your business, about Halo PSA and automations with Roost or within Halo PSA. And we hope that you will take these things and learn to grow not just your business, but your community and our world. Thanks again. Have a good day.